Here's 2 scoops or 180 grams of traditional strawberry ice cream with the calories listed. Now, here's 180 grams of homemade, low-calorie strawberry ice cream that can be made in 5 minutes. That's right, we are talking about a third of the calories for the same amount of ice cream, and this is still using real sugar as a sweetener. If you used a stevia-based no-calorie sweetener, it drops another 48 calories, or you can add some protein powder for an anabolic ice cream like I did with this cold brew coffee flavor. So whether you were trying to put on some muscle with anabolic ice creams or just have a slightly lower calorie frozen treat, this is an ice cream that every home cook should know how to make. So you may be thinking, how is it possible to make this guilt-free kind of ice cream at home? And this was a fascinating topic to explore because essentially what we need to do is reverse engineer traditional ice cream. Let me break it down. A conventional ice cream is made up of just a couple of components, and I highly recommend Dan Seuss's video if you do want to learn more, but let's do a quick recap. So an ice cream base is made by first adding an emulsion of fat and water, and usually this is in the form of milk or heavy cream. Secondly, sugar is added, which provides sweetness and also lowers the freezing point. Third, mobility limiters or thickeners are added, which could be in the form of cornstarch, gums, or an egg custard-based ice cream. Lastly, flavorings like cocoa powder are added to the mix if you want some chocolate. And churning this mixture introduces air bubbles into the cream, making it nice and light. And depending on the ingredient ratios, this base will generally be anywhere from 55 to 80% water. And that water content is actually what freezes into very, very tiny ice crystals, which that, along with the fat and sugar content, is what allows ice cream to remain scoopable even after spending several hours in the fridge. From this, we can learn that the keys for making a quality ice cream is really just controlling 3 variables. 1, the ice crystal size, 2, the air bubbles, and 3, the flavorings. Now, the tricky part in making healthy ice cream is tackling the first part. Why? Well, basically all the calories in ice cream come from the fat content of the milk or cream and all that sugar that is added. And we need to significantly reduce or remove these calories, but those two have a massive effect on achieving that perfectly scoopable texture after being frozen. So what are we to do? Well, we've got to throw it in reverse. So low calorie or healthier ice cream first starts with a low fat milk or liquid. Secondly, a sweetener, either no calorie one like Truvia or regular sugar could be added. Then next we add the mobility limiters like the gums or starches, and finally those same flavorings. Now looking at this is just less ice cream based, so obviously it's lower calories. So to get the same amount, we're actually going to fill up the difference with ice. This is the reverse engineering part of it. Whereas traditional ice cream forms those crystals from the ice cream base itself, we are actually breaking down larger ice crystals in the form of ice and just dispersing them in a smaller amount of ice cream base to achieve a texture that's somewhat like ice cream. And I say somewhat because the texture is really the only downside of this method. Remember how I said the traditional ice cream base was somewhere between 55 to 80% water? Well, this base is way higher than 80%, and the solids are primarily protein instead of fat, which creates larger ice crystals. So you can either eat it right away and it will be like a really soft serve, or if it's frozen in a container, you can still scoop it, but it's definitely got an icy feel to it, just like this coffee ice cream that I made. This stuff isn't magic. I mean, if the low-cal ice cream had a perfect texture just like the full-fat version, that's what all the ice cream shops may as well sell. However, for the 5 minutes that it takes and at such a lower amount of calories, this stuff is great to make at home for scratching that ice cream itch. So now that we understand the basic process of what's going on, let's dive a little bit deeper into the 4 components because there are lots of options with how you can make this. First up, you have your liquid bases. Second, you have the ice crystals. Third, the mobility limiters. And fourth, the sweeteners. And I made up a master list of the categories showing just how many options you have. Now, the liquid base, the ice crystals, and sweeteners are pretty self-explanatory, but if you just mix those 3, all you are left with is a sweet milk-tasting ice slushy thing. To get the texture closer to ice cream is all about the mobility limiters. So this is a term I kind of stole from Dan's video, and there are 2 categories to know here. 1 is the thickeners, and 2 is the water replacers. Thickeners are things like cornstarch, xanthan, and guar gums, and what these do is trap water and increase the viscosity.
Which one is best? Well, it kind of depends. Xanthan gum and guar gum have more thickening power than cornstarch, and here's a little experiment to show that. I added 100 grams of water to a container and then added 10 grams of each thickener for a 10% solution. And as you can see, the xanthan and guar gum are really thick compared to the cornstarch. You can literally make a bouncy ball out of the guar gum, like it's kind of crazy. So obviously we need to use less of the thickeners, which means less calories, which is a plus on the xanthan and guar gum, but I found that it's really easy to kind of overdo it with those, leading to a gummy ice cream. Obviously we don't want to have any bouncy ball ice cream around here. So I prefer to use a tiny amount of the guar gum and then add a larger amount of the cornstarch because it's easier to dial in that texture that you were looking for. Also, a fun fact here, cornstarch is the same thickening agent used in pudding mixes, which is a common addition you'll see people add in these low-cal ice creams. The powder is just a mix of sugar, cornstarch, and flavorings, which is why it's great to use. So thickeners out of the way, the second category are what I call water replacers. This is your milk powder, protein powder, or cocoa powder. These don't really increase the viscosity of the liquid like the thickeners, they really just act as another ingredient in the mix, lowering that percentage of water a bit. So hopefully running through all these components can make you understand how to make the low-cal ice cream based on your goals. I've got two primary ice cream based recipes that I use. One is a plain base for vanilla, coffee, and chocolate type flavors, and then the second is a fruit-based ice cream. So let's do the plain base first. To a blender set over a scale, add 80 grams of 2% milk, 24 grams of sugar or a stevia-based no-calorie sweetener, 20 grams of non-fat milk powder or whey protein powder, a tiny sprinkle of xanthan or guar gum, 10 grams of cornstarch, 240 grams of ice, and then a couple drops of vanilla extract. Now, two notes on blending. My goal is to break the ice crystals down into tiny pieces while minimizing the air that is incorporated. If you blend it too much, it becomes kind of foamy, which I'm not a fan of. With that being said, here's my process for a Vitamix, though whatever blender you have at home will do the job. Start the blender at speed 1 and let run for about 30 seconds to start to crush the ice. And then gradually increase the speed up to 5 or 6 for another 30 seconds, just keeping an eye on it. You may need to tamper it if you do. After about a minute total, I like to turn the blender off and let it relax so some of that air comes out. And at this point, the ice cream will still have some little ice chips in it. So start the blender up again at speed 1 and gradually blend for another 45 to 60 seconds while increasing the speed, and you should be able to see that it starts looking creamier. Once the texture looks decent to you, just stop it and test it. Again, be careful not to overblend and add too much air. And here you have a base vanilla ice cream. This one came out a little bit softer than I normally liked, so keep that in mind. You may need to add more ice or maybe a little bit less liquid to dial in that texture. And also, if you did use real sugar, I find that it freezes well for scooping as the sugar lowers the freezing point, but if you used a no-calorie sweetener, it'll be pretty rock hard. So once you understand the base recipe, the flavorings are really where you can have some fun and explore. So how about we make one of my favorites, a cold brew ice cream. But first, a quick word from the homies at Trade Coffee who sent me the beans and sponsored today's video. Since I just started drinking coffee regularly in the past year, I'm definitely a noob. I just try stuff, but I don't really know what I like or dislike. However, Trade makes it easy to get curated coffee from across the country delivered right to your door. All you have to do is take the coffee quiz, answer the questions, and then they curate coffee choices based on those preferences. For example, I definitely know that I'm now a fan of lighter roast over dark roasts. And once you choose your delivery frequency, it will come right to your door at peak freshness, and then you'll just rate those matches so Trade can continue hitting you with coffees you'll love. So head to the link in the description to take the coffee quiz and use code Chlebowski50, and the first 100 people to sign up will get 50% off their first bag, which Trade guarantees you'll love, but if you don't, they'll send out a different one for free. So sign up for some beans so we can make our coffee ice cream. So one of the bags that I received was from Equator Coffee, which I use to create a cold brew concentrate that I can have ready to go in the fridge for, a cold brew or to make this ice cream. I measured out 25 grams of whole beans and then ground them up before adding them to a beaker along with 100 grams of water and giving this a stir, and then letting it sit out on the counter overnight before straining it the next day. Now, this 1 part coffee to 4 parts water will give me a much higher concentrated coffee flavor, since I do still like to add some milk for the ice cream. With the concentrate done, let's follow that same rough blueprint. So to a blender, I added 40 grams of the cold brew concentrate, 30 grams of evaporated milk, then 24 grams of Truvia, 10 grams of milk powder, 15 grams of whey protein powder, little guar gum, 10 grams of cornstarch, 240 grams of ice, and a bit of vanilla extract. Again, blending that up following the same 2-part process and then churning it out, we have a delicious coffee flavored ice cream. You can make it a little bit thinner for a drink. Again, I would have liked this a little bit thicker, but it's fine this time around. It's super refreshing, the perfect afternoon guilt-free pick-me-up. Now, what about making those fruit-based ice creams? Again, super easy, and these are probably my favorites actually, as the ice crystals in the fruit lead to a much better texture than just plain ice like in that vanilla base. Again, place the blender over the scale and start with 80 grams of milk, 24 grams of sugar, 10 grams of milk powder, 10 grams of cornstarch, a bit of guar gum, and then instead of all ice, I'm going to add 120 grams of frozen strawberries or whatever fruit you would like, then 120 grams of ice, and a drop or 2 of the vanilla extract. Again, I follow that same blending procedure, being careful to break up the ice, but not add too much air, and we have a delicious strawberry ice cream that you can eat every night. This is easily my favorite ice cream of the bunch that I created. The strawberries taste super fresh and delicious, and that texture is really nice like a soft serve. Also, I did try freezing this one since I used real sugar in the mix, and it does come out pretty solid if you want to scoop it. Now, before we wrap this video up, this is where I want your help. Since this ice cream can be made super low calorie, medium calorie, or maybe even higher calorie if you use something like heavy cream, one person like me can't test them all. So I want you all to try out combinations and let people know down in the comments some other common blueprints that you may have tried. And then lastly, I've got a couple general lessons learned in probably the over 30 ice creams that I made for this video. Starting at the top, 1, a solid ratio is 1 part liquid to 3 times the ice crystals, whether that's fruit or regular ice. 2, using frozen fruit gives a creamier and more cohesive texture than just all plain ice. 3, do not overblend or else it gets foamy. 4, use real sugar and additional thickeners if you want to freeze it overnight for scooping. And then 5, find the best tasting whey protein you can for those anabolic ice creams.
So as I said in the intro, this was a fascinating kind of topic and video to make, and it comes out in a really practical ice cream that you can make at home. I probably tried like 30 or so different things, and I think this is better than like traditional ice creams because for me at least, when I'm going out to get ice cream, it's very much a spur of the moment thing. You know, you either pick some up at the grocery store, maybe go down to the local spot and get a scoop or two. You know, even if I did have the foresight to make some, it's like I gotta drop like $100 on a machine, or I gotta do a manual churn, which can take several hours. You know, it can be fun for the novelty of it. But on the other hand, this kind of low calorie ice cream, you throw everything in a blender, it comes in like 5 minutes. You can try a million different combinations. So that's gonna wrap it up for me in this one. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed. If you guys try out some ice creams this summer, definitely send them to me on Instagram. That's gonna wrap it up for me in this one. Catch you in the next one. Peace, y'all.